Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we break down complex guides, stacks of research, and reports to give you the knowledge you need to be, well, truly informed and fast. And today our goal is, I think, incredibly critical. We're focusing on a topic that really does touch every corner of your life. I mean, from your personal relationships all the way to your professional world. We're talking about the mechanics of psychological influence. You shared this just incredible stack of sources with me, a guide that's really designed less for, academic theory and more for proactive, practical psychological self-defense. So our mission today is to help you move from that reactive posture, where you feel leveraged or confused, to a truly resilient one, to a place where you can recognize the pattern long before the trap is even sprung. We're going deep into the architecture of psychological control. We're going to dissect how simple persuasion can become covert manipulation and, in its darkest forms, even systematic abuse.
That's exactly right. Our entire focus is strategic. We want to demystify these tactics so they lose their power over you. They can seem almost magical in the moment, but the truth is they're entirely predictable. They're formulaic. And to do that, to really achieve this, we're going to move through three pretty clear stages. First, we'll examine the psychological foundations. So what are the predictable human vulnerabilities that actually enable influence in the first place? Second, we're going to catalog the specific tactics that you'll see used across relationships, at work, and, of course, in the digital world. And then finally, we'll assemble a practical, tiered defense framework. Think of it as a set of non-negotiable procedures to make you a structurally harder target.
I like that framing. We're building psychological armor piece by piece. Okay, so let's unpack this starting at the absolute core. Before we even get into specific tactics like gaslighting or whatever, we have to look at what makes us vulnerable. Why? Why are we so easy to trick sometimes?
It really all comes down to cognitive efficiency, or what Daniel Kahneman famously called System 1 thinking. The core insight, and this is so important, is this. Manipulators don't invent new human flaws. They don't have to. They just exploit the incredibly fast, automatic cognitive shortcuts our brains rely on to get through daily life.
So we're optimized for speed, not always for accuracy.
Exactly. Especially in social interactions. These shortcuts, these engines of influence, they're essential for us to function. We couldn't operate without them. But they are also the primary attack vector for anyone looking to manipulate you. Understanding that our vulnerability is a feature of human cognition, not some kind of personal failing, that is the strategic first step to defending yourself.
Okay, so speed is the weapon. Our brain's own drive to conserve mental energy is what gets leveraged against us. So let's look at those classic building blocks, the ones that are designed to hijack that fast, intuitive System 1 thinking. Our sources really emphasize the 7 universal principles of persuasion. And I think it's crucial to state this up front. These principles are inherently neutral, right? They could be used ethically or unethically.
Absolutely. They are just universal laws of how we interact socially. We can start with the one most people probably recognize, which is reciprocity. This is that deep-seated feeling that if someone gives you something, even a small, unsolicited favor or a free sample, you feel obligated to return that favor.
Often in a much bigger.
Right, often in a much bigger way. Yes, you feel this psychological debt has been created, and now you have to clear the ledger.
And this is something that's used all the time. But how does a manipulator really amplify that feeling of obligation, beyond the actual value of whatever they gave you?
They exploit the asymmetry. The favor they grant, let's say it's offering you 10 minutes of detailed free advice. It costs them very little. But the psychological weight it places on you, the recipient, is enormous, especially if they frame it as them going above and beyond for you.
Oh, I don't normally do this, but for you.
Exactly that. And the manipulator uses this induced debt as leverage to ask for a far greater, often high-cost return. Maybe it's a huge financial commitment or asking you to cross a personal boundary. The key is to recognize that the unsolicited nature of the gift is the first sign of a hook. You didn't ask for it, but now you feel you owe them.
Which flows right into the next one, liking. This is just a fundamental social shortcut, right? We're so much more likely to comply with people we genuinely like or feel some kind of connection to.
And manipulators manufacture that rapport at an unnatural speed. They do it through excessive flattery, often flattery that feels just a little too good to be true. Or they do it by establishing these uncanny, seemingly spontaneous coincidences.
You're from Cleveland. My cousin's best friend lives in Cleveland. What a small world.
Right? Or they'll start mirroring your body language, using the same slang you use, or claiming this intense shared history based on 1 or 2 things you've said. Oh, you like dystopian fiction and hiking. We must be soulmates. All of this is designed to bypass your slow, skeptical analysis and get you to trust them instantly.
And that's a really powerful insight right there.
Yeah.
The difference between genuine connection, which, takes time to build, and manufactured rapport, which feels instant and almost suspiciously perfect.
Precisely. Next up, we have authority. We are socially conditioned from birth to defer to titles, to uniforms, to credentials. A skilled manipulator relies on that automatic System 1 compliance that's triggered just by invoking a title. It could be doctor, professor, lead analyst, or even just IT security.
The danger here, it seems, is that they're relying on the invocation of authority, not the actual verification of it. In our modern digital life, this could be someone just using a lot of specialized jargon or having a really impressive-looking LinkedIn profile to discourage you from asking any hard questions about their actual qualifications.
Exactly. The automatic response our brain has is, well, this person must know better than I do. And just like that, critical thinking shuts down. Then there's scarcity. This one is powerful because it weaponizes our fear of loss. It is one of the quickest ways to trigger a fight or flight response, which is absolutely crucial for emotional hijacking.
We see this constantly in marketing, of course. Limited time offer, only 3 seats left on the webinar. But when it's used manipulatively, how does it become truly dangerous?
It forces accelerated decision-making. That's its only purpose. The manipulator insists that the window for action is closing immediately, or they'll say that the opportunity will just vanish if you take time to consult a lawyer or your spouse or a mentor.
They're trying to isolate you and speed you up.
They are. It short-circuits that crucial 24-hour period of rational review, your System 2 thinking, and it forces you to operate entirely on the impulsive fear of missing out.
And what about social proof? That's the everyone's doing it principle. My brain's shortcut is, if I see a crowd running in one direction, I should probably run with them. They must know something I don't.
Right, and the manipulator leverages this by providing what looks like overwhelming evidence of acceptance, but it's often unverifiable. We're talking about fake testimonials, vague claims of widespread success, thousands are getting rich with this method, or, showing you only the 5-star reviews while hiding all the negative ones. If you believe that the consensus supports the action, your own individual resistance to question it just drops dramatically.
Then we get into a kind of momentum with commitment and consistency. This one feels really insidious because it leverages our own internal desire to be perceived as rational and stable.
The famous foot-in-the-door technique is the masterclass here. It's so effective. They get a tiny yes from you for a small, low-cost request. Maybe it's signing a non-binding online petition or agreeing to a free 15-minute consultation.
Something that feels harmless.
Completely harmless. But once that first commitment is made, they start to escalate the requests. And we feel this internal pressure to agree to the larger request because failing to do so would make us feel, and importantly, appear inconsistent with our prior actions.
That's incredibly subtle. You're
Ah.
basically being guilted by your own past behavior. It's a trap you help set for yourself.
And finally, the 7th principle is unity. This is a deeply powerful, often exploited principle that appeals to a shared in-group identity. If a manipulator can convince you that we are family, or we're the true believers, or we're in the inner circle, then questioning the group's direction feels like an act of betrayal, a betrayal against your own fundamental identity.
This sounds like the core mechanic of cults.
It's extremely prevalent and effective in cults, yes, but also in high-control ideological movements and even some toxic corporate cultures.
Wow. Okay, so that framework alone, those 7 principles, it just shows how systematically manipulators can approach human interaction. But our sources highlight that the stack of vulnerabilities gets even deeper when we factor in our own inherent cognitive biases, these predictable flaws in our judgment.
These are gold mines for manipulators. They're systematic errors in how we process information. Let's start with confirmation bias. Our brains are not objective processors.
Huh?
They actively seek out, interpret, and filter for information that validates what we already believe.
So if I already have a suspicion about something, or a specific political view, or a financial belief, the manipulator doesn't have to convince me of a totally new idea. They just have to feed me evidence that confirms my existing beliefs.
Precisely. And this makes the target incredibly resistant to any contradictory evidence, no matter how strong or well-supported it is. The manipulator just reinforces the pre-existing belief, which makes them seem trustworthy, even if they're completely fabricating their evidence. It's a closed loop of affirmation.
And the anchoring bias, the over-reliance on the very first piece of information you're offered. This is absolutely critical in any kind of negotiation, isn't it?
It sets the entire field of play. A skilled operator always ensures they control the opening frame of a discussion. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. You know the industry standard for the role is around $120,000, but the first number the recruiter says is, "We were thinking in the range of $80,000.
Right away, my expectations are reset.
Completely. Now, if you manage to negotiate them up to $100,000, it feels like a huge win because it's so far above their anchor. But you're still $20,000 below the actual market rate. They locked your psychological reference point down immediately.
Okay, now let's talk about the sunk cost fallacy. This one feels like maybe the most emotionally and financially destructive bias in the entire arsenal of an abuser or a scammer. It's that refusal to cut your losses because of how much time or money or emotion you've already invested.
This is so deeply exploited in abusive relationships and in failing business schemes. It's tragic. The manipulator doesn't even have to promise you great things in the future. All they have to do is constantly remind you of how much you've already sacrificed.
We've been through so much together.
Exactly. The internal narrative for the target becomes, "I can't quit now. All that time, all that suffering, it will have been for nothing." The fear of admitting that a past choice was a mistake, that fear can be so powerful that it anchors the target deeper and deeper into a losing commitment, despite overwhelming evidence that they should just walk away.
But where's the line there? I mean, how do we differentiate between being manipulated by the sunk cost fallacy and showing legitimate resilience or, perseverance? Those feelings can feel very similar.
That is the essential question. And answering it demands that you engage your slow, rational system 2 thinking. Resilience is defined by adapting your strategy based on new data with a clear and defined goal in mind. Sunk cost thinking is defined by ignoring new data simply to justify past expenditure.
So one is forward-looking and the other is backward-looking.
That's a perfect way to put it. The difference is the rational review of the current evidence. If the evidence shows the project is failing or the relationship is harmful, continuing to persevere is not strength, it's irrational.
That clarity is just invaluable.
Hmm.
Okay, finally in this section, we have the availability heuristic.
This is where we overestimate the importance of information that is most readily available in our memory. And that information is usually something vivid or recent or highly emotional. A skilled manipulator uses this to control your assessment of risk. They might tell you a single shocking anecdote, a vivid story about a recent home invasion in a nearby town, or a dramatic account of a stock market crash.
And even if that event is statistically a 1 in a million occurrence.
It doesn't matter. Because the story is so vivid and available in your mind, you start to believe that this highly improbable risk is actually imminent and you need to buy their security system or their financial product right now.
They're essentially controlling the media reel that's playing in your head, using these intense visuals to guide your decisions away from objective statistical analysis.
Exactly. And speaking of intense emotions, these principles we've discussed are turbocharged by what our sources call emotional and social exploitation. This is the shift from subtle persuasion to aggressive control. This is where critical thinking is physically shut down.
The primary technique here being emotional hijacking, what is physically happening in our brain during what's called an amygdala hijack.
The amygdala is our emotional response center. It's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. When it's triggered by sudden intense emotions like fear or overwhelming shame or even intense flattery that disrupts your skepticism, it essentially bypasses the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the seat of our rational system 2 thinking.
Correct. So your capacity for critical thought just evaporates instantly. It's a physiological response.
That's the moment of panic, the point of no return in a scam.
It is. The target's focus narrows dramatically, their compliance accelerates, and their ability to process complex information, like reading the fine print in terms and conditions or verifying someone's credentials, it just vanishes. It's the instant window of opportunity the con artist needs to land the punch.
And this is often paired with social engineering, which attacks the human element directly. We tend to think of hacking as this really technical thing, firewalls and code. But social engineering exploits human trust to bypass all of that.
It's the art of psychological access. Phishing emails, pretexting, where they create a detailed, believable false scenario, and baiting. They all rely on the same premise. That humans are inherently helpful, trusting, and prone to panic when faced with authority or urgency.
A strong firewall is useless if a person inside willingly hands over the keys to the castle.
It's always the weakest link. And then we reach the systematic long-term control tactics, the ones that are aimed at creating a state of perpetual confusion and dependency.
We're talking about gaslighting, Darvo, and love bombing.
These are tactics designed not just to influence one decision, but to systematically distort the target's entire reality. Gaslighting, for instance, is the steady erosion of your trust in your own perception and your own memory. Over time, it makes the target completely reliant on the manipulator's version of reality.
And DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, that's the ultimate defensive maneuver for an abuser, isn't it?
It's devastatingly effective. It instantly flips the script. The target comes with a legitimate concern, and suddenly they're on the defensive, overwhelmed by moral outrage and confusion. And love bombing sets the stage for dependency by creating this unrealistic high, this period of intense adoration, only to suddenly withdraw that affection, making the target desperate to do anything to regain that initial idealized state.
And these are common in intimate partner abuse, but you see them in other places too.
Oh, absolutely. They are powerfully used in organizational bullying to isolate and control high-performing individuals who might be seen as a threat.
Okay, that gives us the architecture, the why, and the how they get in. It's a lot, but it's a clear foundation. Now, let's transition from that theory to the practical field guide. If the first step is understanding the engines, the second step has to be recognizing the models as they roll off the assembly line and knowing how to deploy an instant disruption. We're moving into section 2, focusing on pattern recognition and those instant countermeasures. The goal here is to move from a confused reaction to a procedural, almost automatic response.
Let's break down the classic persuasion techniques first, because these are the most common attacks you'll face day to day. We can start again with reciprocity.
Okay, so the identification signs. That unsolicited favor, the free sample, the sudden generosity, and it's immediately followed by pressure for a much larger commitment.
The primary countermeasure is to deliberately build psychological friction. You have to consciously do it. Accept the freebie calmly without allowing that feeling of debt to attach itself to you. A key phrase to rehearse in your mind is something like, "Thank you for that, but my decision on X is completely independent of your kindness."
You have to verbally, or at least mentally, sever the connection.
You must. You have to set a clear boundary that you reciprocate only on your own terms, if you choose to at all. You owe nothing for an unsolicited action that was designed purely as leverage.
Okay, next up, scarcity and urgency. We're looking for aggressive countdown timers, a refusal to give you time to review something, and that intense pressure to sign or buy or commit on the spot.
The countermeasure here has to be behavioral, and it must be mandatory for you. Enforce a personal minimum delay rule. Maybe it's 24 hours, maybe 48, maybe 72 for big decisions. This rule is non-negotiable. You pre-commit to it when you're calm. So when the pressure hits, you don't debate the deal, you just deploy your procedure.
My personal rule is I never make significant decisions immediately. Please send me the written terms and I'll get back to you.
Perfect. That's the script. You also have to independently verify any claims of scarcity. Is this really the last one? Probably not.
That 24-hour rule is effectively you appealing to your own slower, more rational System 2 brain, forcing it to engage after the emotional panic has a chance to subside.
Exactly. It completely neutralizes the amygdala hijack simply by inserting procedural delay.
What about authority? The signs are a heavy emphasis on titles or expertise without any verifiable evidence, or appeals that actively discourage questions. The classic, "Trust me, I'm the expert on this."
The immediate counter is verification. You have to develop the habit of independently verifying credentials, licenses, or track records. Do not just accept a title or a uniform at face value. Ask for verifiable proof. A published paper, an official ID, a license number you can look up online, and always, always seek a second qualified opinion for any significant decision, whether it's medical, financial, or legal. Undue deference to authority is expensive.
And the subtle art of liking. This one is tough. How do we defend against manufactured rapport when, frankly, it feels genuinely nice to be flattered?
You have to perform a kind of mental triage. The identification signs are that excessive or insincere feeling compliment that comes right before a request, or those uncanny coincidences, or the obvious mirroring of your mannerisms. The primary countermeasure is to mentally detach the compliment from the objective criteria of the request. You have to firewall them off from each other.
Don't let the flattery influence your judgment on the merits of the actual deal.
Exactly. You have to focus solely on the evidence. A great way to do this is to ask yourself, if a stranger I actively disliked made this exact same proposal to me, would I still accept it?
That's a fantastic frame shift. Okay, and finally, commitment and consistency, the incremental asks.
The identification signs here are a series of small, seemingly harmless requests that slowly and steadily increase in scale, locking you into the path toward a much larger commitment. To disrupt this, you have to pause and reevaluate the entire arrangement. You have to look at the cumulative cost, the full trajectory of where this is going, before you agree to any new incremental step.
And it takes real courage to say, you know what, I agreed to the first couple of steps, but based on where this is headed, I'm pulling the plug right now.
It does, but you can't let your past compliance trap your future self.
That covers the standard persuasion tactics. Now, let's move to the really high-stakes emotional manipulation techniques that require a more structural defense.
These are the tactics that are layered on top of the cognitive biases we talked about. They're designed to create systematic dependency and, in many cases, real trauma.
Let's start with gaslighting.
Yeah.
The signs are that feeling of persistent confusion, being told you're too sensitive, or that you're imagining things about past events that you remember quite clearly.
The crucial non-negotiable defense for this is contemporaneous record keeping. You must keep notes, take screenshots, save emails, timestamp events, and log things immediately after they happen. This shifts any dispute from a subjective memory battle, which is a game the manipulator will always win, to an objective, fact-based discussion. You're creating an external, objective shield against their reality distortion.
And if you're in an abusive situation and you have to confront them,
You only use the script. I remember that differently. Here is the note I took at the time. That's it. You don't argue, you just present your record.
the power of that note is that it's immune to their emotional influence.
Mhm.
Okay, then there is Darvo deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. This is that immediate aggressive counteraccusation when you raise a legitimate concern, forcing you to defend yourself instead of having your original point addressed.
The primary countermeasure is, again, documentation, but also emotional composure. You have to document every exchange meticulously and then methodically, calmly restate the facts of your original concern. You must refuse to be drawn into the spiral of blame they are trying to create.
Don't take the bait.
Do not take the bait. If this is happening in a professional setting, escalating to HR or management with your documented evidence of both the original infraction and the subsequent DARVA maneuver is essential. You have to stick to the facts of your initial concern.
We also discussed the cycle of narcissistic abuse. Love bombing, devalue, discard. It's so hard to defend against the initial love bombing because it feels so incredibly affirming.
That's the mechanism of control. The identification signs are that over-the-top, too-good-to-be-true adoration very early on, immediate pressure to cross personal boundaries, a rush to intimacy. The primary countermeasure has to be intentional friction. You must consciously slow down the pace of intimacy. Insist on maintaining your existing personal boundaries around your time, your money, and your personal space. And critically, you must actively and visibly maintain your external social support network. Let them see you have friends and family. Isolation is the absolute prerequisite for severe abuse.
So if the manipulator's goal is to isolate you, your counter is radical inclusion of your trusted network.
Absolutely. And that leads directly to triangulation, using third parties to control information or create rivalry, sowing conflict by misrepresenting what one person said about another.
The classic office rumor that's designed to create distrust between team members.
Yes. The primary countermeasure is simple. Bypass the triangulator. You go direct, contact the third party directly to verify the information. A simple, hey, I heard X was the case. Is that accurate? You should request direct, one-on-one communication for all critical matters and just refuse to engage in any indirect mediated gossip. You have to seize control of the communication flow.
That brings us squarely to Section 3. Recognizing how these personal emotional attacks scale up and manifest in organizational, digital, and other complex systemic environments.
Yes, because when these tactics hit the workplace or the internet, they exploit the complexity and, frankly, the bureaucracy of large systems. This often makes the manipulation much harder to spot because it can be disguised as professional jargon or routine procedure.
Let's start with workplace and organizational manipulation. How do things like gaslighting and microaggressions really manifest in an office, especially now in a hybrid work environment?
They often show up as stolen contributions, where your idea is presented as someone else's, or constant confusing blame shifting, and of course the infamous shifted goalposts.
Where the project requirements are changed right before the deadline is due, making success completely impossible.
Exactly. And in a hybrid setting, selective exclusion from vital communication channels, like a key Slack channel or a Zoom meeting, is a very common tactic.
The countermeasure here has to be structural then. It can't just be a conversation.
It requires rigid systemic documentation. You have to get in the habit of using email to confirm all verbal agreements, all project changes, all additions to scope. And importantly, you have to CC relevant stakeholders to create a verifiable communication trail that cannot be easily denied or erased later on. You have to insist on shared, written project plans and deliverables.
Then there's information hoarding or selective disclosure, withholding key data to put others at a disadvantage, often framed with that plausible deniability. Oh, I thought you knew about the budget cut.
Your defense here is to insist on shared documentation platforms, like a shared Google Drive or a Confluence page, not just personal emails, and to have shared meeting minutes with clear action items and follow-up processes for everyone involved. You should never rely solely on a single individual for critical information access, especially if that person has a history of selective disclosure. Maintain your own backup of necessary information.
What about when performance management itself becomes a weapon? Performance sabotage masked as feedback is extremely difficult to defend against because it hides behind the shield of professional authority.
It does, and it relies on vague, non-actionable criticism. It's the classic, you just need to show more executive presence, or your energy is a bit off in meetings.
Things you can't possibly act on.
They're impossible to act on. Or it's the assignment of impossible, inconsistent targets. The defense is to demand objective specificity. You have to ask for specific behavioral examples for all feedback. If the criticism cannot be tied to a measurable, observable behavior or a specific outcome, it is almost certainly subjective and likely weaponized. You must request documented, measurable performance metrics that are applied uniformly to the entire team.
If they can't measure it, they can't objectively hold you accountable for it. That's a great line in the sand.
Exactly. And that ties directly into policy weaponization. This is the sudden, strict enforcement of a previously ignored, maybe obscure or flexible rule, but it's targeted at a specific individual or group.
This exploits the fact that most organizations have tons of policies that are often loosely enforced until they need some leverage against a particular person.
It's a systemic power play. Your countermeasure has to be procedural. You request documentation showing the uniform application of that policy across the entire organization over a substantial period of time. You need to record any evidence of selective enforcement. If the policy is being applied to hurt you but is being ignored for everyone else, that evidence must be raised through formal, protected channels like HR or a union. You frame it as an equity issue, not a personal one.
Okay, let's shift to the digital sphere.
Yeah.
Social engineering and digital scams are, at their core, psychological attacks that use those same principles of authority and urgency to bypass our technological defenses.
And the identification signs are remarkably consistent. You're looking for unexpected requests for credentials, for money, or for sensitive data. Messages from slightly misspelled domains, they're often just one character off, like gogol.com. Urgent threats like, your account will be closed in 10 minutes if you don't act now. Or someone posing as IT asking you to click a link or run a remote script on your machine. This is pretexting, building a false but believable scenario to gain your trust and access.
The stakes are so high here because they are exploiting the single weakest link in any security system, the human who is under pressure.
The primary digital countermeasure is a simple two-step process. Step 1. Never, ever give credentials, access, or money over the phone, email, or text. Period. And always use multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Step 2, and this is the most critical part, verify the identity of the requester through a separate, known channel. So if you get a call from bank security, you hang up. Then you call them back using the official number that's listed on the back of your bank card or on the bank's public website. You never use the number they just gave you.
You seize control of the verification process.
You have to. And within the digital world, we also have to talk about dark patterns in tech and marketing. These deceptive design choices that leverage our biases, like the anchoring bias and what's called the status quo bias. These are user experience or UX design patterns that are intentionally created to nudge users into choices that benefit the service provider, often without the user's full awareness or consent.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Hidden fees that only appear at the very final stage of checkout. Default settings that automatically opt you into data sharing or marketing emails. Extremely complex or confusing paths to unsubscribe from a service. Or those artificial scarcity countdowns on digital goods that are not, in fact, scarce at all.
So it's the user interface itself being designed to manipulate your consent. They're leveraging our natural tendency to just accept default settings and our reluctance to wade through a bunch of confusing options.
The defense against this requires conscious effort and a healthy dose of skepticism. You have to meticulously audit the entire user experience before you complete a transaction. You have to assume the default option is designed to benefit the service, not you. The best defense is to support strong regulatory protections like GDPR-style transparency, which hold companies accountable for their design choices. But personally, you must manually opt out, manually change the defaults, and always search for the fine print.
Okay, this is great. We've established the foundations, and we've cataloged the specific tactics and their immediate responses. Now we need to integrate all of this into a structured, actionable plan. This is Section 4, the Practical Defense Framework, your personal blueprint for resilience.
This is the crucial stage because, as we've said, when your amygdala is hijacked, you cannot trust your intuition. You just can't. You need a preset diagnostic tool and a set of non-negotiable procedures that you deploy instead of relying on your gut feeling in that moment. This whole framework is designed to force your system to thinking to engage, even when you feel emotional or panicked.
And that starts with the red flag checklist. This is an early warning system designed to offload your cognitive load when you feel confused or pressured.
Think of it as your diagnostic test. The rule is simple. If 3 or more of these are true in any given situation, the mandate is clear. You must pause and evaluate immediately, no exceptions. So, 1, you feel rushed to decide or you're told there is no time. 2, your memory or perception is repeatedly dismissed or contradicted. 3, you feel guilty, ashamed, or responsible for another person's emotional state on a recurring basis.
4, you are heavily flattered, or you receive an unsolicited gift, and then you're asked for a significant favor soon after. 5, someone refuses simple, reasonable verification requests, like showing their ID, providing a receipt, or putting the terms in writing. 6, secrets or confidential rules are used to forbid you from seeking outside advice from your spouse, a lawyer, or a mentor.
7, you're asked for credentials, passwords, or to install remote access tools. That's a clear social engineering attempt. 8, your peers suddenly start avoiding you, or you find yourself constantly triangulated in conflicts. And 9, all the promises are verbal, and they are repeatedly delayed when you ask for them to be put in writing. That checklist is a powerful objective indicator that manipulative intent is present in the interaction.
And once those flags are raised, we move to the tiered defense strategy, which scales the response based on the level of threat. Tier 1 is all about those immediate measures, stopping the momentum and inserting friction right away.
This is the immediate deployment of the rules we established earlier. First, you pause. Deploy your standard delay rule. I'll think about it and get back to you tomorrow. Second, you document. Log the call, save the messages, take screenshots, create that contemporaneous factual record. Third, you verify. Call back via the official public contact information, not the suspicious number they provided. And critically, you secure. Immediately review your digital safety. Is MFA on everywhere? Do you have strong, unique passwords? You are freezing the interaction and securing your position before you do anything else.
Tier 2 then focuses on medium-term resilience. This is about building friction into your ongoing environment, moving the defense from being reactive to being proactive.
This involves real behavioral changes. You have to set and then rehearse clear personal boundaries regarding your time, your money, and your information access. And you have to be prepared to enforce them, which can be uncomfortable. You must proactively involve witnesses. CC your stakeholders on important emails, or ask a neutral third party to sit in on conflict-prone meetings, especially if you suspect gaslighting is happening. And if the environment is becoming emotionally damaging, you need to get support. Engage with therapy, coaching, or external support groups. Remember, isolation is the manipulator's greatest weapon. Connection is your strongest shield.
And finally, we have Tier 3, strong interventions. This is for when the manipulation has become deeply abusive or systemic within an organization.
At this stage, you must use the systems that are designed for protection. This means HR or legal escalation, following the formal grievance processes with all of your meticulously documented evidence. If the threats involve physical harm, stalking, or actual physical abuse, you contact law enforcement. And in the case of large-scale scams or systemic deceptive marketing, you have to pursue regulatory action by reporting them to consumer protection agencies. You use the force of the system to counteract the abuse of power.
The framework then concludes with something incredibly practical: the practical scripts and micro-behaviors. These are tactical phrases designed to let you seize control of an interaction's tempo and framing, replacing an emotional reaction with a calm, procedural one.
These are your cognitive circuit breakers. They're pre-planned. For de-escalation and boundary setting, you need phrases that buy you time and reduce their leverage. For example, I appreciate the urgency you're expressing, but I have a policy of not deciding on the spot. I will review this and reply by 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Or if they ask for personal information you're not comfortable with.
I'm not comfortable sharing that. If you need it, please send a written request that I can review and I'll get back to you. This does two things. It sets a boundary, and it puts the administrative burden back on the manipulator. It slows the entire interaction down.
And what about when you're facing that outright gaslighting?
Mhm.
What does the factual, unemotional script sound like in that moment?
It needs to be detached, and it must reference your objective record. So instead of arguing about the emotional framing or who felt what, you simply state, my recollection is different. Here's the email I received on Tuesday. Or, I'm not interested in arguing about motivation. Let's just stick to the facts. The call happened at X time, and the documented file shows Y result. You refuse to be drawn into their emotional quicksand.
And to counter that manufactured urgency which is used to fuel scarcity.
You can just say, no thank you. If this is truly time-sensitive, please send me the exact deadline and the rational justification for the immediate rush in writing. This immediately exposes the manipulation for what it is. If the urgency is legitimate, they can document it. If it's manipulative, they will balk or become aggressive, which is itself another critical red flag.
And that crucial workplace microbehavior, the documentation trail confirmation.
After any critical verbal instruction, any negotiation, or any agreement, you must immediately send a confirming email. Something simple like, just to confirm our discussion from the meeting today, I will complete X task by Y date, assuming Z resources provided. Please let me know if this is correct. This establishes a verifiable timestamp trail that locks down the goalposts and prevents any future claims of miscommunication or memory failure.
Okay, so immediate defensive actions are essential, but true security, as you said from the beginning, really comes from developing long-term systemic resilience. This brings us to our final section, Section 5, becoming a hard target through proactive daily habits.
This is where we shift the focus from reacting to individual threats to structurally hardening your personal and professional operating systems so that manipulation simply doesn't gain a foothold in the first place.
This sounds like integrating personal security into your daily routine, like brushing your teeth. What's the first systemic habit we need to cultivate?
You need to cultivate a record-keeping habit. This needs to become a standard, time-stamped log, not just for when there's conflict, but for all important communications, decisions, and verbal agreements. This proactive habit shifts any potential dispute from a subjective memory battle, where the manipulator always excels, to an objective, fact-based discussion where structure and evidence win. This is your personal ledger of truth, and it must be maintained consistently.
And this reinforces that concept of procedural friction we keep coming back to. Institute standard decision delays.
The 24-hour rule needs to become dogma for all non-emergency significant decisions. This is your mandatory cooling-off period where your rational System 2 analysis automatically has a chance to kick in. The cost of a 24-hour delay is almost always orders of magnitude less than the cost of a rushed, manipulated decision made under the pressure of urgency or scarcity. This rule must be pre-committed, rehearsed, and non-negotiable, even when they tell you the offer expires in 5 minutes.
To counter the manipulator's primary strategy of isolation, you recommend establishing what you call a trusted triad for consultation.
You absolutely need external perspectives. You need to identify 2 or 3 trusted individuals. It could be a mentor, a spouse, a financial advisor, a lawyer, people who are emotionally detached from the specific situation. They are critical because they are outside the manipulative bubble, and they can run those System 2 checks on your behalf. They can spot the cognitive biases and the emotional triggers that are impossible for you to see when you are inside the pressure cooker.
And you make an agreement with yourself now, when you're calm, that you will consult them before making any significant decisions.
Exactly. It's a structural defense against confirmation bias and emotional hijacking at the same time. We also need to develop emotional literacy. This is really about creating psychological distance from the pressure you're feeling. You need to train yourself to recognize and then name your feelings in the moment. I am feeling pressured, or I am feeling confused, or I am feeling a surge of shame. The simple act of labeling the emotion forces your System 1 to slow down, and it allows your rational prefrontal cortex to regain control of the situation.
It acknowledges the feeling without allowing that feeling to dictate your response.
Precisely. And on the digital front, we need rigorous digital hygiene. This means making essential security non-negotiable. Strong, unique passwords that are managed by a password manager, multi-factor authentication enabled everywhere it's offered, and operating with limited admin privileges on your key devices. Security is not a one-time setup, it is a consistent, systemic process.
And finally, integrating legal and financial safeguards as a proactive shield.
You have to structure your affairs to minimize your vulnerability. Use clear written contracts for all significant transactions, maintain a strict separation between your personal and business finances, and ensure transparency in all financial arrangements. A manipulator thrives in ambiguity and chaos. Your defense must be absolute clarity and documentation.
This brings us to what I think is the most powerful strategic concept in our source material, the core principle of defense and adopting the red team mindset. Let's try to synthesize everything we've learned into this one core idea.
The core principle is this. Manipulation works because it pairs our normal social instincts like reciprocity or liking with emotional triggers and with information asymmetry. Therefore, the single most effective generalized defense is procedural friction. By implementing non-negotiable processes, slowing down, demanding documentation, insisting on external verification, you neutralize the manipulator's core weapons of manufactured urgency and undue authority.
It neutralizes scarcity and authority simultaneously, and it forces the entire interaction onto a playing field, the written objective record, where the manipulator loses their primary advantage.
Correct. And the red team mindset is about anticipating their strategy in order to preempt it. So if you know the manipulator's primary structural goal is to isolate the target from outside counsel, your preemptive counter is already built into your system. Maintain multiple communication channels and proactively involve your trusted advisors. You deny them the opportunity for isolation before they can even try to achieve it.
And if the manipulator's goal is to exploit emotion to bypass rational thought, that classic amygdala hijack, the preemptive counter is to rely on your pre-committed decision rules, like the 24-hour delay, which you established when you were calm.
You decide on the rules when you have all your faculties, and you follow those rules religiously when you are under duress. You are essentially fighting a psychological fire with organizational structure. This proactive mindset transforms you from a vulnerable target into a structurally hard one.
This has been an incredibly detailed and I think very practical deep dive into what we can really call psychological armor. We've covered the fundamental engines of influence, we've identified the specific tactics you'll see in your personal and professional life, and we've built a tiered defense framework that's designed to bypass that emotional response. To quickly recap the key strategic takeaways for your immediate application, just remember that core link between the tactic and the counter. If you face scarcity pressure, the immediate counter is that procedural delay in requesting a written offer. If authority is being leveraged against you, you must verify their credentials and call them back on an official, published number. If you are being systematically gaslit or dealing with Darvo, you have to stay fact-based and reference your contemporaneous documented evidence. And if you are being subjected to the emotional high of love bombing, you must intentionally slow the pace of the relationship and rigorously maintain your external social contacts. The key realization here, I think, is that true resilience is not about passive defense or learning a few new tricks. It is about actively reshaping your environment, your processes, and your systems to make manipulation structurally difficult. You are building operational security for your own mind. And this leaves us with our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. The highest level of defense is realizing that you must learn to trust your systems and your procedures more than you trust your own gut reaction, especially when you feel intense emotional pressure. So the question is, what one procedure, what one non-negotiable 24-hour rule or documentation habit will you implement today to make yourself a structurally harder target?